Well, thank you very much, Heather, and good morning to every one of you. Thank you for joining us on what is a very important topic, and it's a very timely topic, we think, for the school business officials. I am Steve Van Hoosen. I'm the Director of Government Relations and Professional Services here at ASBO, and I want to just reiterate that you do have the option to submit chat questions throughout the presentations that you hear. We will be addressing those during the question and answer period, along with call-in questions when we get there, and Heather will explain that again once we get to the end of the first hour. For the topic, dealing with an unpopular budget, clearly this has been a very difficult and stressful budget development year for school districts, and tough compromises between local tax increases and programs have led to many controversial and contentious meetings in the adoptions of school budgets that, despite best efforts, are unhappy with certain segments of your voting publics. But in many ways, the hard budget work is really just beginning. Defending the budget at the hearings, understanding the budget voting results on May 18th, making decisions regarding a contingent budget if that's what you have to do as a result of May 18th, and then dealing with the fallout from the cuts throughout the year as people recognize what the impact has been of the budget that's been approved in your school district. I mean, those are just a few of the challenges that lie ahead, and are things that you're going to have to deal with the business official, your superintendents and boards throughout 2010-11. To do that, we brought together a panel of public relations experts and experienced school business officials to provide their advice on really how to navigate through this year and some unprecedented questions that you may be getting along the way. So I'm going to introduce our panel in the order in which they'll speak. They'll be talking each for about 15 minutes or so for the first hour, then followed by the Q&A. First, we have Mark McGuire and Sean Casey. They are from Eric Mower Associates, which is a public relations firm that works with many school districts across New York State and, again, throughout the nation. Their office is in Syracuse, and they work with many school districts, as I said, on issues such as this. Joseph Eberly is the business administrator from the South Jefferson School District in the North Country, and Joe's district is a high state aid dependent district, so the issues that have been taking place in his districts have been extremely high stakes, particularly from the context of cuts rates on the locality. So Joe is also someone who you need to hear from that perspective. From the Albany School District, we have a combination. Bill Hogan, who is the Assistant Superintendent for business there, and is joined by Ron Lesko, who is their public relations professional on staff. So they will be talking about this from Albany's perspective, and if you're near Albany, you understand that Albany as a small city has unique circumstances with charter schools, a highly charged political atmosphere. So if you can relate to those types of things, what they have to say will be very helpful as well. And the rounding out the panel is Joseph Dragone. Joe Dragone is the Assistant Superintendent at the Roslyn Public Schools. Joe is a highly respected business official across the state, and as the Assistant Superintendent at Roslyn, has learned and knows a thing or two about a divided public and the value of communication. So what I would at this point like to do is to ask Mark and Sean to kick off our presentations. You gentlemen all set?
Yes, we are. Steve, thank you very much. we have a couple of brief slides that we're going to walk you through. Steve, I see you're moving through them now. Sean and I are going to do this on sort of a tag team basis. One of the things that we'll get right to the substance right off the bat. One of the things we want to encourage you to do is to determine now what your story is. We've all heard the joke about the crook who is interviewed by the law enforcement officials, and he comes up with a story, and at the end of it he declares, "That's my story and I'm sticking to it." Well, public relations has been defined as doing the right thing and getting caught at it. And what we want to encourage school district officials to think about is, what is the story that we are going to tell when we get caught? Before we start trying to get caught doing the right thing, we should know what our story is. We should have it down, and it should be something that rolls off our tongues as quickly and easily as the story of our romance with our spouses, the story that we tell our children about how we met and fell in love. So in our line of work, we call that messaging. And messaging is what you say about yourself as often as you can, and regardless of what you're asked. There are typically 3 or 4 assertions in messaging, each of which is supported by 3 or 4 facts or statistics or anecdotes. An assertion might be that such and such a school district has a long record of creatively and aggressively managing taxpayer dollars to create and deliver the best possible education. Facts and statistics might be comparing your tax rate to those of neighboring school districts or a statewide average. It might be information on the academic record of your students on standardized tests, college readiness rates, graduation rates. So it's 3 or 4 assertions, each supported by 3 or 4 facts or anecdotes. You should have messaging for the school district that is more or less permanent. What you're going to say about your school district now, and that you're likely to be saying some variation of 3 years from now, and that you were probably saying some variation of 3 years ago. So you have permanent messaging. You also have messaging that you developed that echoes and overlaps with your permanent messaging that you use to address any specific issue and any specific crisis or news opportunity. An obvious example would be messaging that you would prepare for contingency outcomes on May 18th. It is tempting for us to say, I have worked in education for 3 decades, I have worked for this school district for 12 years, I have this stuff down. And Sean and I want to encourage you to resist that temptation. Messaging, properly executed and properly developed, is written. It is 1 or 2 pieces of paper, typed, proofed, vetted, approved, that you can hold in your hand when you're on the phone with a reporter, that you can read on your BlackBerry when you need to refresh your memory before you give a public appearance. So it is written. It is written and reviewed and vetted. It is in a tight 1 or 2 page format. And the last bit of advice we want to give you with respect to messaging is keep in mind that an assertion is an assertion, but facts and stats are what you use to prove it. So there is real power in the supporting facts that you use to prove your assertions, to prove your argument. So we want to encourage you to consider developing fact sheets. 1 page of bullets with numbers, facts, statistics, trends, comparisons, so that you're not just claiming that you're good, you're proving that you're good. We have a simple expression in our line of work that facts are your friends. So now, Steve, if you can give us the next slide, I'll turn it over to my colleague, Sean.
Thank you, Matt. So the thing we want to talk to you about is pretty simple, some of the basics here. The first one is that one of the lessons I think is taught in your kindergarten classes, and that is to just tell the truth. It may seem like a simple concept, but it isn't really when you're in the midst of a firestorm. And we certainly understand that, but it's what you need to do. You don't have an option. If you do anything other than that, anything you do subsequently will be undermined. You need to do it in sans the jargon. So, right, every profession has its own set of vernacular. Now, I will confess to you all that I was once a member of a board of education long, long ago. So I understand and know the vernacular. But if you use the words or use the phrase SED or SAMS or building aid or any of those other things that make people's eyes glaze over, they become automatically suspicious of you. Resist the urge to do that. I love to say it around here because it creates a good warm feeling, but you have to explain what it is you're explaining as if you were doing it to your mother. I don't know about you all, but my mother is a natural-born skeptic. It's hard to put anything by her, and she does not tolerate a whole bunch of words that really don't need to be in the sentence. So let's not be patronizing, but at the same time, you need to be very straightforward. No cute sleight of hand things. That stuff just does not work. Anyone who tells you, Ron, you're on the line. Hello? Ron Lesko? You're here?
I am here.
Wapani? Yeah. Ron and I are old friends and old colleagues, and he's a reporter in recovery. He knows that. You can smell it coming a mile away. So can the average person when you're standing in front of a room full of people. They are skeptical. They are angry. They are naturally suspicious. Don't give them reason to be more suspicious. You are who you are. You do what you do, and there's nothing to apologize for that about, but you need to be straightforward. If we could go to the next slide, please. Okay. So bad news is bad news. I don't know that there's any school district anywhere in the state that has a whole lot of good news with respect to budgets this year. That's a given. I think the average person in the state understands that there's enough trauma to go around here. Admit the fact that it's bad news. You can sugarcoat a lot of things, but you're not going to be able to sugarcoat this. It is what it is. The sooner you are able to just say it and do so with, frankly, just direct words, simple, easy to understand words, we're off to a good start here. As a business manager, you are viewed as the business manager. People have, I think, preconceived notions about what you do. Generally, they are that you're in charge of the money and of the numbers. You are the expert. You are the source of the data. You are the expert analyst of that data. And you are, for better or worse, the defender of both. The fact that the news is bad should not change that. Again, don't be apologetic for what you do or how you do it. Be very straightforward about it. Those of you who are old enough to remember the old Dragnet series, Matt, you are, right? So just the facts, ma'am, right? Do not go off in a long, the other people whose roles may require them to be a little more descriptive. Yours should not. The numbers are what they are. People view you as a number person. Here's what this number is. Here's what it means. Don't polish them into something they're not. You need to, and we'll get to this a little later, you need to find ways to describe those numbers and describe what they mean in such a way that the average person can understand it. Now, I know that the world in which you all live is a complicated swamp sometimes, what those numbers are and where they come from. It is a mystery. I defy anyone to explain to me the logic or methodology by which state aid is distributed. We all know that it's not done with logic and care very often, but that's the way it is, and it's okay for you to say that. Here's the numbers we have been given. Here's what they mean to us. Again, being very straightforward, being very factual. And the last piece I want to add here is not everyone is the smartest person in the room. If someone comes up with a question along the way that is, catches you and is something you don't have an answer for, it's okay to say, that's a great question. I don't have an answer for that, but I'm going to get you one. By the time they figure out that you're, complimenting them on coming up with a great question, you're on to the next question. Matt, back to you.
All right, so we've talked about the value of preparing your messaging, doing so in writing, and having a mindset that accepts realities about the public and admits that bad news is bad news. So now we have our mindset properly adjusted. We have some written documents that we can work with, and we are now going to think about specifically how we are going to prepare for interviews, for interactions with the public, interactions with the media, the opportunities that we have to deliver our messaging and to tell our side of the story. And our advice, Sean and I are advising you to not assume that your knowledge and skills are enough. You have to turn off the BlackBerry, shut the door, hold your calls, and actually prepare. And you should get ready now. You should set up systems that you can use to monitor on a daily basis things that are being said about your school district, about your budget, about any issue that you might have. And you do this by using Nexus alerts if you're a subscriber to Nexus, or Google News alerts if you want to do it for free. These will let you know when newspapers and blogs and websites are saying anything and everything about your institution. When you see information that is incorrect, that is being represented as fact anywhere, you should immediately correct it. That doesn't mean calling the reporter and screaming. It means sending the reporter an email or a telephone call in which a calm and monotonous tone of voice you say, "Hey, I just wanted to make sure you understand your story this morning said X. In fact, it should have said 2X. Here's why you got it wrong. Here's why it's important. Thanks for paying attention to this. Let me know if you have any questions." So as you monitor what's said about your school district so that you can correct errors, and in preparing now, part of that process is asking what are the questions that you really don't want to get asked. Where are we most vulnerable? Write down those specific questions and prepare your responses, again, in the form and format of messaging and fact sheets. You do not want to be in a position where a question that you could have anticipated takes you by surprise, and your answer winds up having a lot of stuttering, a lot of ums, a lot of ahs, and some "I'll get back to you on that." There's nothing wrong with saying "I'll get back to you" when you don't know, but you don't want to do that on tough questions, because the tougher the question, the more that seems evasive. So you prepare and you practice answers to identify tough questions, prepare answers, practice delivering them before you're asked. And for our last slide, I'll turn it back to my colleague, Sean.
So practice, practice, practice. You have the time to do it. Take advantage of that time. You know, as Matt just said, where your vulnerabilities are. You live in the community that your school is located in. You know how people feel generally. You know what the tough questions are going to be, anticipate them, and develop the answers to them. Do it ahead of time. The time to do that is not while you're at a heated public meeting. I dare say if you went through that exercise and spent the hour or so it would be to sit down, maybe with others, and write that list of questions. Start with the ones you most do not want to have asked. Clients hate it when Matt and I do that to them, but it's one of the first things we ask them. What's the question you least want to hear? And let's start from there. Believe me, that will pay dividends down the line. You need to be calm, and you need to make sure that no one ever sees you sweat. You are, after all, a straightforward business manager. You are all about the numbers. Don't let them see you sweat. Practice, practice, practice. And when all that is done, practice some more. So I think Matt and I have used up our allotted 15 minutes, and we'll move on.
Thank you, gentlemen, and I was notified that I misspoke. Matt McGuire I introduced as Mark McGuire, and he's assured me that while he
we call him Fred.
is a good hitter, he has not taken steroids. So it's Matt McGuire, not Mark McGuire. My apologies to you, sir.
No worries.
Okay, we're going to move on now to Joe Eberly. As I mentioned in my introduction, Joe is the business administrator from the South Jefferson School, and Joe probably doesn't want me to tell you how many years he's been doing this and has seen circumstances such as this before, and as a high aid-dependent district, like I said, expects to have issues related to taxes and programs come up any time that there is concern about state revenues and the state budget. So I'm going to ask Joe if you would jump right in and share your wisdom, please.
Well, thank you, Steve. I won't tell you how many years I have in the system, other than I'll tell you that I'm T-minus 3.5 years. So that may give you some indication of my age here. I was reflecting a bit on Matt and Sean's somewhat optimistic view of bad news is bad news. Around here, bad news is rather optimistic because what we're facing is darn near catastrophic. When the governor's proposal came out with his reduction plan, it really hurt schools like South Jefferson, and so we've been focusing on trying to recover from really having our foundation shook. Just to give you a little perspective about South Jefferson Central School District, sort of frames my comments here. We're at the eastern end of Lake Ontario, home of lake effect snow. And as of today, actually, it's quite beautiful out, 60 degrees and sunny, so we'll take it. But in our area, we're very dependent. Most schools up here are very dependent on school aid, especially aid that's non-restricted. And we are especially hurt by the governor's proposal. So, in reflecting, what we're all about, and over the past number of years, I can't recall a time when fiscal leadership is more important than it is right now. It's one thing to have a surplus and to maybe defend those surpluses that business officials might keep off to the side. It's quite another to be able to go into a battle knowing that a main resource that you depend on and count on is really struggling. When the state suffers, we suffer, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But it stresses right now the emphasis on fiscal leadership. And what do we do to accomplish that? Well, we're looking at our first sort of summary slide here, just to give us some framework for our discussion here. This is our definition of fiscal leadership at South Jeff. We're going to focus on goals, and we're going to identify and press on with priorities in spite of where we are, and in spite of what that bad news might look like. We're a goal-minded, putting emphasis on our priorities, and making sure that that message gets out there loud and clear. And thanks for those tips, guys. I was comforted because we can put our hands on exactly what you're talking about. We're sending a message out there. There's an opportunity to analyze our feedback. You said daily. That's pretty aggressive around here, but then nonetheless good advice. And we've taken a look at a couple pieces of data, and I'll show you in our slides in a little bit later. We like to provide financial facts. Facts are our friends. I loved it. We have a cadre of financial facts, and we put them together in a book that people around here are used to seeing. And we like to reiterate where we are with certain key facts. We often look at our votes, and we have a little graph coming up about depicting a couple of data elements and sort of trying to predict outcomes from a historical perspective. And then, of course, the big decision, and that is, where to set that tax levy. And we're right on the cusp of that right here at South Jeff. We're still arm wrestling with that today. So that's sort of our framework here for the next 10 minutes or so. So I'm going to ask Steve if you just hit the next slide for us. I put these out there for just a little illustration of what our goals are. Now, these goals are visible. They're on our websites. They're part of all of our offices. The community, if asked, would probably guess what our goals are because they've seen them so often. We're obviously, our reputation is for high academic excellence, and anytime that is challenged, we're on it because we honestly feel that we are a high academic excellent district, and our goal is such. By the way, the goals say 2809. I'm just using last year's. We could use 910 here. They're nearly interchangeable. Obviously, we're very concerned about tenure of our at the highest level of our staff, and in the last couple of years, we're continuing to be fiscally responsible, and taxpayers love to hear that. It's right early in our goal stream, and we want to make sure people know that this is an important piece of our community that's being fiscally responsible of honestly the largest employer in our area, clearly the largest employer in our area. So we hopefully set the stage for fiscal responsibility. Let's take a look at the next slide, and this finishes up our goals. One of the things we stress is we want to hear from our community. We want to hear it. If it's positive, we want to hear it. If it's negative, we want to hear it. And we're training our administrators in effective communication strategies as well. And our Board of Education knows that our training is there, or we're working on it, and providing opportunities to open up feedback. Sometimes districts, are sometimes deaf to that. Nobody likes to hear bad news. Everybody's proud of their school district, and we don't sometimes like to admit that the emperor might not have any clothes on, but we do open up that opportunity for feedback, and we welcome it. We like to see our Board of Ed set the pattern for staff development, and they do. They encourage it. They do it themselves, and they encourage and reward it in their staff. And obviously, being the center of our community, and not only the physical center, but the asset center, but many of our community members look at our school district, its buildings and its use, and use it very often. And the look of it is important. Is it clean? Is it organized? Is it being maintained? Is it meeting our needs? And that is a big deal around here, to have our schools to continually evaluate our district facilities and work to that end. The next slide talks about 4 of our priorities, and I like to stress that we're pressing on with these priorities. They are on every desktop around here, including the business officials. They are part of all of our administrative goals and objectives. They are made very visible on our websites. This is where we're heading. We're all about literacy and safety and security, and we do a lot of drills in that regard. The public knows that we're all about these priorities. The conservation of resources is a topic talked about a few years ago, and that obviously is continuing. And developing a policy of fiscal essentials. Don't be asking for something that we just cannot deliver from a fiscal perspective, because we're adopting this fiscal essential policy. Next slide talks about analyzing feedback. And we evaluate our community at the polls at the end of the budget vote, and we say what are the 4 or 5 most important things about our school district. And year after year, our voters, those that come out to vote, provide low class size for improved instruction is always number 1. That's a big deal for our community. And so we sort of base our fiscal plan on these feedbacks. Our students and our parents enjoy those extracurricular activities because many times that's the only social sort of outlet some of our community members enjoy. So that's a high priority for our community, and we know that. We also know that low tax levy is third on the list. It is not number one. And as we'll see a little bit later, there's this conflict going on with the tax levy and what's important in the school district. And also, our district wants to know about us, and we use our website exclusively. The next slide talks about some facts. We do provide some basic facts to our school districts. Again, this is pretty basic. This says, listen, taxpayer, as a percent of budget, South Jefferson Central School relies both heavily on state aid and uses the local taxpayer as only a small percent of the budget. And now this is both good and bad news, and we're faithful to tell them that it's good news if you're a local taxpayer, but it's bad news if you're heavily reliant on state aid because of, obviously the big piece of the pie, when that is reduced, more dependence on the local tax levy, may put more pressure there. So we like to tell the taxpayer, listen, we think our program is getting a lot of bang for the buck because we're doing a lot with a small local tax levy. So these are important things to get out. This is just one piece of data that's easily explained, and I think people understand that. And so when we deliver the bad news about severe cuts in state aid, they already know that we're heavily dependent on state aid because they've been hearing me speak for 26 years about this reality, and they see it in print. So again, but this is just one piece of many that we distribute. And the next piece is a little bit more complicated. We do like to analyze.
Yep, it's going to take me a second here, Joe, to get that next slide going here.
Okay. As Steve is putting that together, we do analyze a couple of data elements and try to get some sort of predictor of outcomes. We have looked at the number of yes votes we get and compare that with the amount of tax levy increase. It's just two data elements. Now, we could look at several different data elements, but this graph only looks at two. It looks at, what percent yes have we got over the past 23 years. There's 23 years there. And compare that with the tax increase. And how does that compare with the averages? And we found some correlations. Get this, in all but 2 years, the percent yes was higher than the average percent yes, when the tax levy increase was lower than the average tax levy increase. Now listen, the public is not going to understand this. This is not for publication for them, but it is for us internally. We like to look at this thing because we can see that if we want a high number of a yes vote, and in some years we need that, then we better come up with a tax levy that's lower than the average percent increase over the past 20-some years. And so we take a look at this and we say, can this district support a high tax levy, especially during these moments? Well, this is just one piece of data we might look at. But I can tell you that, some of the best times we have had administratively at our top management meetings is when we review the results of the budget vote. What's happening out there? What triggers certain people to come out to support us? What triggers those naysayers? Do we give them, I read it someplace, I think Joe's going to talk a little bit later about it, do we give something to vote yes for? Are they ticked off at something we've done, and are they going to vote no for it? But so evaluate what's going on, even on a historical basis. Again, this is only two data points, but honestly, it serves as a pretty good predictor of what's going to happen. And lastly, the last slide here, Steve. sort of summarizes the point of where we are right now. Where is that tipping point? Where is the line? I used to have an old a board member, a very good board member, early on in the budget process. He said, Joe, where's the line? And that's the big question. Where is the tipping point? At what point can we assess that levy? At what point are people going to say yes, or at what point are they going to say no? We're struggling with that question even today. We're still not there yet. Where is that tipping point? What will our community pay for? They take pride in our schools. Sometimes when we cut educational programs, we get a backlash from that. People saying, well, why are you cutting that? That's more important than the other thing. And it's amazing some of the arm wrestling we get into, the battle between sports and taxes. We can line up 10 people that support a strong instructional program and reduce our sports program, and vice versa. So it's quite a battle that goes on. What is the community willing to pay for, and what are they willing to give up? And then my big thing here is, and my voice always talks about the long-range impact. What happens next year? If you set your levy low this year, you're not going to have it there next year. Or if you set it too high, are people going to turn off, and you're going to have a toxic environment as you unfold the budget. So these give you hopefully my 15 minutes of fame here may have given you some things to think about, some data points to consider as we sort of unwrap this budget that nobody's happy with. I haven't found anybody that's excited about it, me included. So hopefully you've garnered some things here and can help you as you move forward.
Well, thank you very much, Joe. We'll move right along to ask Bill and Ron to again share their thoughts about what they've been considering, and now that they're going forward with a budget, how they deal with some of these very difficult things when they know they're going to have to live with this difficult budget. So, Bill, Ron?
Thank you. It's Ron Lesko. I'm going to start off, and then I'll pass the baton on to Bill, hopefully within about 5 minutes or so. So here we go. As Steve mentioned off the top, in Albany, we do have some, unique circumstances that we have to deal with every year. Certainly, as the Center of Politics and Government, the Commissioner of Education, the Governor, and our mayor can all walk out of their office and throw a stone and hit our building, and they don't have to be Mark McGuire to do that, or even Matt McGuire. So that presents some interesting challenges for us and opportunities as well. And of course, in Albany, again, as Steve mentioned, our charter school situation is unique, certainly on a state level, but also on a national level. But we all have our specific issues and challenges, and our approach, no matter what our school district is and no matter what those challenges are, should be the same, irrespective. My very first point that I'd like to make is that passing your budget isn't something that you should be thinking about doing in April and May. It's something that you need to be working at and thinking about all year round. And you do that by working with your communication staff to accentuate the positive in your school district, to talk about those things that your community really values, to talk about the way your students achieve, about the professionalism that your staff has. Again, working throughout the year to make sure that your community understands that you do a good job educating their children, keeping their children safe, and providing great value for the money that they invest in you every year when it comes time to pay their tax bill. And you also need, on a year-round basis, to be building relationships with your community, whether that's through public meetings, whether that's through committees, ad hoc committees or standing committees that you have. Involve the community. And not just the folks who are always there to support you. You want to engage the folks who are there to to go back to my initial analogy, throw stones at you. You want to bring in those dissenting opinions. You want to hear from those people, not just to turn them, but to hear what they have to say and to make them feel like they're part of the process and to make them feel like they're listened to, so that when it does come time, like we all are facing right now, when we all are facing a difficult budget, they understand what you do on a year-round basis as a school district. They understand the way you try and address the issues that you have as a school district, and they're inclined to be more supportive of the difficulty that you have in budget years like this. And then it gets to be budget season, and what we have found to be very beneficial for us is to know your message early, to get your head around your financial reality early, and to get the message out early. And to do that, you have to understand exactly what your budget situation is going to be early and how you're going to address that. And you have to work internally to understand the ramifications of potential cuts that you're going to make, of the ways that you're going to address the fiscal realities of the ways you're going to address those situations. And as Sean and Matt talked about off the top, you have to begin writing down what those messages are going to be, and you have to be able to stick to them throughout your budget process. And for us, we realized in January, as soon as the governor announced his budget, that we were facing a $20 million problem, and that was our problem. Between the cuts in state aid that are proposed, almost a $4 million increase in charter school payments this year, and almost a $10 million increase in salary and benefits that we are contractually obligated to pay, almost a $20 million gap. That's about 10% of our budget, and that's our problem. And we understood that problem, and we communicated that problem from January on. We were consistent with it, and we wanted our community to understand these are tough times. These are very difficult times. Here are the realities we're facing. This is the problem we have to solve, and then we went about telling them how we were going to solve those problems. And those were the facts, and we backed up our message with the facts. We didn't just say these are tough times. We showed them how they were tough times, and we were very prepared with important messages about how we are going to address those. And as everybody is facing, that meant some very difficult decisions for us. But our community was prepared for those difficult decisions because they understood that these are difficult times. It's also critical for school districts not just to think about communicating externally to your public, but to make sure that everybody internally is on the same page. And that means communicating all those same messages and all those same realities to all of your management levels, so that everyone at those levels, all of your managers, understand the situation, they understand the reality, and they understand how you're going about the tough business of solving it. And they're very important communicators for you as well. They're going to be talking to their staff, they're going to be talking to parents, they're going to be talking to community members, but they all have to have the same message. If you don't have the same message coming out of the organization from every level, your message is going to be diluted, your message is going to become complicated, it's going to be misunderstood, and you're going to find when it does come to be this time of year, when you're really trying to get the community behind your budget, you're going to find that work is going to be even harder as you put together your budget newsletters and your community presentations, because there's not going to be a common understanding of what the issues are and what your strategies are to solve them. So again, you need to make sure that you communicate all of your messages internally as well. And you have to work together. You have to have teamwork as an organization to solve those problems. Matt made the point right off the top. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. And he's absolutely right. You have to be consistent throughout your budget season with your message. Our message was, we've got a $20 million problem. And we were consistent with the ways that we were going to solve it. We had a tier one level of cuts that got us halfway there, and then there were some factors that we were waiting on, the governor, some negotiations with our union. We were very clear about those items every step of the way. We let our community know what the outcome might be if we weren't successful in getting some relief, some financial relief along the way, which we have been to a degree successful at. We had 2 schools possibly being closed on the table. We had 40 more jobs in addition to the 100 that we proposed right away, waiting in case we didn't get some of that relief. But we let our community know that early. We let them know it often, and we were always consistent. And that's a very important part of your budget presentations through your process. Make sure that all of your presentations have the same information, unless, of course, there are financial realities that change it. But don't say something at a meeting in February and then change it no matter how much in March. You have to be very consistent throughout the process with your message. And to do that, as Sean mentioned, you have to practice. Practice, practice, practice. You have to be prepared with what your message is. You have to be able to back it up with those key points, and you have to work your community through it. And by starting early, which we were able to this year, and I think is a great opportunity for everybody looking forward, you're able to get the community acclimated to whatever your reality is, and that when it comes to May 18th, they've had an opportunity to understand exactly where you are as a district, exactly what it means for their kids, and exactly what it means for their tax rate, and hopefully through your process you've been able to get enough folks behind you so that you can move along toward looking to next year. And I'll give it to Bill now.
Hello, this is Bill Hogan. I'm going to speak about delivering the budget. And the first bullet I have acknowledged the current situation. This isn't something we really dwelled on, but we wanted to set the table and established a strong starting point, which is what we did. And it seemed to work out pretty well for us, but we let everyone kind of knew we were in a fiscal crisis. That's not really news, but you still have to say it. We had also let them know it was going to be extremely difficult because we had cut 113 positions last year, and our tier level 1 cuts, which all ended up getting adopted, called for cutting another 100 positions. So we made it clear we can't continue to do everything we're currently doing the same way. Once you kind of set the table that way, we immediately tried to move into the positive. Because there is a lot of stuff that we are doing that's very good, and there's a lot of academic support, a lot of programs before, after school, pre-K. So we kind of launched into, and certainly will throughout the rest of the budget process, launch into a real campaign of positiveness. We've all got to remember that the state has injected billions of dollars of new money into public schools over the past decade. So even though we're all doing a lot of cutbacks, there's still a lot of programs that we just take for granted, like pre-K, that are a huge opportunity for students and not mandated. Next slide. Another thing that I found to be helpful is the public, we have our reputations as a bureaucracy. The public is also kind of chomping at the bit to hear about anything at all that we're doing in terms of cost savings initiatives that we do. And we all do several things throughout the year that sometimes, is an oversight not to talk about. But I remember last year when I did this and put out that slide, it seemed to, you get a lot of more respect and people understand. I always explain we're looking at cost cutting 12 months a year. This isn't just something we do once a month, and for a month in February. So the public's always happy to hear that. I also like to talk about long-range planning. We're all hit with things like a board member wants to do a full liquidation of fund balance and all reserves, and sometimes, you'll have people in the community, sometimes your own employees out there, don't cut my job, just liquidate the organization. So, we pretty much just lay that out on the table. Here's what we're going to take from fund balance. Here's the percent of fund balance we're using. Here's what the percentages of reserves. We're not going to clean the place out because we're always looking 3 to 5 years out. And that always seems to kind of reassure them as well and gets them out of the 12-month scenario. Because you have to look beyond, obviously, 12 months. So that kind of gives the public some confidence, too, in that you know what you're doing and you're not just shooting from the hip on some of these decisions, that they're thought out. And the last item on that slide, again, you have to acknowledge and understand, but also just let the public know that, look, we're dealt with a bad hand of cards here, and we're going to do everything we can in the best interest of the students and student achievement, realizing that there are going to be reductions and sacrifices. But certainly we're going to keep our eye on the ball in terms of student achievement and getting everybody up to where they need to be. Next slide, please. We all get this concerns from people in the community. They may want to cut overtime. They may want to cut administrators, TAs. Typically, the last thing they ever want to cut is teachers, where you may, in fact, have had declining enrollment, and it's something, in our case, we had lost 2,000 students over 7 or 8 years to charter schools, and maybe not taken corresponding reductions in teaching positions. So a lot of times you've got to look at, obviously, staffing is our large expense. We looked at that, but we were, when we cut teachers, the public is very concerned about, are you cutting electives, class sizes, what's going to be the impact? So, you need to be able to explain the impact when there are kind of emotional issues of what you're doing, and also assure that you have a plan to deliver the process. And also, some of their suggestions you can run with, and whenever you can, that's helpful. And if not, at least you can explain why not. And sometimes when they raise a question, it kind of makes you think and check of something else. So maybe they gave a suggestion that really wasn't any good, but while you were looking at that, you said, you know what, I can cut contractual by, $200,000. It's always good if you can give something else up instead. Say, the public raised the concern about overtime. I went through that. Here's all the things we're doing to control it and monitor it throughout the year. I don't see where there's anything there. But, I was looking at contractual, and I can capture some savings here. So it's helpful if you can give something up, even if it's not what they want. Sometimes they have some suggestions that kind of lead you in a different path, but you still get the same outcome, which is reducing your expenditures. I just next wanted to speak briefly about public meetings. Some of our PR people have said it well, that essentially we have to remain calm under all circumstances and be respectful. A lot of times, my next bullet, don't get caught up on difficult or emotional issues. There are certain conversations that you could have with public for days, and they're not going to see it your way. So in those situations, in basketball they call it stick and move, but stick to the message and stick to the facts and try to move on. Always be understanding and at least recognize their point of view. And when you're in these situations where it may be emotional, like you're closing a school building, so there's nothing you can possibly say that's going to convince that person, give short answers and try to keep the meeting moving along. And if you stay in that one spot too long, you may drown. And then there's always the escape hatch too, is that you want to check into something further in more detail. That's a good point. Let me look into that, and I'll report back at the next meeting. So, and the last thing, I guess, another raft out there could be these are when you're in kind of situations that are emotional, and you're not going to sway the individual. You can always look to help from your superintendent. Sometimes they'll see that you're taking some hits, and they'll look over there. Sometimes they'll bail you out. So given all of that, we had, as Ron Lesko, my partner here, suggested, we've had a really challenging budget this year with a lot of, we call them Tier 1 cuts that included 100 staff reductions. All of those ended up being adopted in our budget. But in the end, it actually went well. We've had 3 or 4 people from the public came up, even though we cut stuff. There was stuff in this budget that got cut that somebody had a problem with every cut, at least one person. But the public actually came up to us and talked to us about they liked the process. They thought it was open. They felt that they were heard. And even though, maybe there's something in there they didn't like, everyone we've heard from since has said that they would, they're supportive of the budget, which is amazing when you take $20 million out of a budget and people are still going to support it even though there's tough cuts in it. So our tax levy right now is projected to be 3.87%, which is very high for Albany. Albany, generally, you want to be around 2.5% or definitely under 3%. So we're still hoping for any additional money that came in would reduce our tax levy further. But at this point, that's what we're going out with. So that concludes my piece. I'll turn it back over to Steve.
Sure. Bill, Ron, thank you very much. Bill, I'm going to ask you one question. You mentioned the $20 million hole, and you talked about the kind of the Tier 1 level types of cuts or reduced staff. Could you just take maybe 5-10 seconds and just give an indication of where some of those programs were? Were they across the board in those 100 staff reductions, or were they concentrated? If you could just briefly touch on that before we move on.
Sure, 1 second. Well, the reductions for us were we discontinued the Reading Recovery Program, restructured it. We actually have 29 full-time reading teachers even after this change for additional services. We eliminated pre-K specials, art, music, and phys ed. In our pre-Ks, we actually had tenured teachers in art, music coming into those classrooms. So I don't think very many districts have that, but we took that out. We reduced our librarians. We're starting band music at 4th grade instead of 3rd grade. And we're changing our high school from 9 periods to 8 periods. We had a $600,000 reduction in professional development, which was a special national program we had been involved in for a 3-year period. We took out pre-K transportation. We changed some things with our assessments. We are going to close one building. That building in particular wasn't very controversial because it was just a few kids. There's only a couple hundred kids in that school. And people knew we were moving in that direction.
Okay. Well, I appreciate you going through those. That was one of the things that had popped up during your presentation. So thank you very much. I'm going to move right on. Joe, you still with us?
I am.
Okay. So as I indicated, Joe DeGones, the Assistant Superintendent for Business at Roslyn Public Schools on Long Island. And Joe, take it away, please.
Thank you, Steve. I'm kind of in a happier place having heard what Albany is going through, knowing that we don't face the same kinds of problems. What I'd like to talk to you about is some of the issues that have been addressed as the topic of the seminar. The first one was the roles that various people play in the budget process. I'd like to just give you some thoughts that I have, and maybe you could react to them in the form of questions that you might want to ask. It is my opinion that the Board of Education has the lead role in this budget development process. After all, it is their community. We don't live here. If they decide that extracurricular activities are not as important as sports, that's their decision to make, not ours. The superintendent's role, he needs to be the focal point for educational leadership and political leadership. He's the guy who's got to make sure that all the pieces fit together. He's the one who's got to keep his eye on the ultimate prize, which is the educational program for all children. And our role as assistant superintendents for business, we're looking at a different prize. We're looking at long-term stability. We're looking at sustainability. We're looking to make sure that the superintendent does not put us or the board does not put the district in a position where we make promises that we can't keep beyond 1 year. I think we need to remember that building leaders have a very important role in the budget process. Every time a building leader thanks the community for coming out to support the spring concert or the athletes on the team or the National Honor Society induction, and reminds people that it is their support that makes those events possible. It helps us in the budget process. But perhaps most important is the role that building staff members play. We've all had the disaster where a teacher says at back to school night, you know, I wish I could have given you a sample of your child's work, but we don't have enough money in the budget for paper this year. That one comment could undo 7 million charts that we put out there describing what a wonderful school system we have. Or the secretary who answers the phone and says, yeah, I'm too busy to talk to you right now because I got 7 different things to do as a result of the cutbacks, so why don't you call back later? Again, that one comment could have the result of destroying all of the messages we try to put together about the wonderful school system we have. So make sure that you keep your building staff involved in the process. And if we can go to the next slide, Steve. I think it's very important for us to make sure there is something to vote for in this budget and not just something to vote against. If we're proposing that taxes are going to increase, we need to make sure that people understand why. What is it that they're getting in this budget? A status quo budget with a tax increase is a recipe for disaster. I also agree with a number of the speakers who have mentioned that honesty really is the best policy. Doom and gloom and rose-colored glasses, neither of them are appropriate. The facts are the facts, and we need to make them clear as we possibly can. We need also to focus on a long-term plan that shows the light at the end of the tunnel. Business officials know this better than anyone, that every budget is more than a one-year process. It's at least 3 years. It's what happened last year, what's going on this year, what we're planning for next year, and how we're planning to continue that in the years beyond that. A public relations expert has told me that we really need to focus on selling the problem and not the solution. A person who really understood this well was Bill Clinton when he summarized his campaign by just saying it's the economy, stupid. What we need to have people understand is the problem that we're facing, not whether or not it's this particular job program or that particular tax incentive that'll get us there to a solution, but what is the problem that we face, and make people understand that problem. In our case, it's the lack of state support for the state function of education. Next slide, Steve. You're going to face, as I am sure we all have this year, some angry public meetings, and I'd make these 3 suggestions to you. Avoid crosstalk. Comments at a public meeting should be addressed to the board president, redirected to the superintendent if the board president chooses to do that, and only then should they be directed to you if the superintendent chooses to do that. Having one community resident stand up and argue with the presentation made by a second community resident and you trying to be the referee between them is just not productive. Don't personalize the anger. They're not angry with you. They're angry with something other than you. So don't personalize it. But at the same time, don't poo-poo it. Don't deny it or diminish the anger that people are expressing. There are people who are losing their homes, and they're angry about it. And the approach that I try to take as often as possible is to recognize their feelings, understand why they might believe a certain fact, but give them information that might help them to see it differently. And I try to frame every answer to every question that way. Next slide, Steve. The role of public opinion in shaping the budget, if it's before May 18th, I think that we should look at public opinion as helping us to shape the presentation, not to shape the facts. The facts are the facts. The fact that somebody believes that school districts are wasting money should lead us to make presentations, as somebody has mentioned before, about how cost-effective we are and what processes we're putting in place to make sure we spend taxpayer money wisely. May 18th, really remember, is the only public opinion poll that really counts. But the day after May 18th is time to start working on next year's budget. Somebody mentioned this before, that we really should not be focused on the budget in the weeks right prior to May 18th, but we should be focused on it 12 months at a time. And I think that something we really need to keep in the back of our minds is whether to committee or not to committee. The budget advisory committees that have been in place have been very, very helpful in some communities. In other communities, they've been lightning rods for the gadflies who have an opportunity to have the central administration involved in issues that really are peripheral to the budget. So make sure if you do have a budget advisory committee, it's well structured with a good charge issued by the Board of Education directly to them, that they know that they're advisory to the board, that they don't control the process, and certainly that they are not the people who supervise the business official and the superintendent in the construction of the budget. Next slide, Steve. Somebody poke Steve and wake him up, would you? Nah, there you go. Analyzing the budget vote results, there's a number of things that you may already be aware in terms of budget votes. There is software that's available that would help you to identify whether the people who have voted are parents, staff members, students, or none of those, that they're just taxpayers who don't have a direct interest in the schools. It may be helpful for you to know how many of your parents have actually voted. Obviously, you're not going to know how they voted, but it may be helpful for you to know that the percentage of parents voting is declining, or staff members are not voting the way you would expect them to in terms of numbers. I also think that some school districts that divide up their election areas into districts have an advantage in some ways because there may be some geographically related issues. If one side of town is served by a particular middle school and the vote in that area is particularly positive, there may be something going on in that middle school that you should be looking at that's indicative of how you can improve the overall vote. Exit polling is critically important as far as I'm concerned. Giving people an opportunity to tell you whether or not they have children in school, and if they do, whether they thought the budget was high enough, low enough, or just the right amount. The Goldilocks effect, I want you to remember that 77% of the people who vote have no children in schools. So the budget for them could be never too low. Keep that in mind as we talk about the possibility that people are going to come out and vote against the budget because it's too low. I don't believe that happens. And the last thing I think you should be looking at is if you have repeated budget failures year after year on the first vote, the question often comes up, should we be putting up a lower budget for a second vote? Or should we be saying to people, look, this is not our first shot. This is not a negotiation with the community. We're putting up our best budget, and if it doesn't get passed, we understand that we're going to contingency. Just something to think about. Next slide, Steve, please. One of the thoughts that I have is a dilemma that we're facing when we do put an unpopular budget up or a budget with an increase in it that is lower than we might have wanted. The question is, should we craft the budget so that students don't feel the difference? Should we say to parents, when your children walk in next year, they won't feel the difference when they walk into this building? Or should we be putting a budget together where everybody in the community feels some pain? The reason why I ask that question is if we can put a budget together which students are not going to feel the difference, well, why haven't we been doing that all along? I also think that we should be looking with every retirement or resignation or leave of absence, is there a way, before we automatically fill that position, have we considered ways of consolidating the duties and the elimination of unnecessary work? For example, in Roslyn, we had a principal account clerk who resigned, and we decided that we had enough people in the accounts payable department to actually carry the workload, with the exception of the end-of-year development of financial statements. So we chose not to replace the person and hired instead a consulting accountant to help us close the books. We also have a part-time district clerk, and we had a resignation in the business office, a retirement resignation in the business office. What we decided to do was to move the part-time district clerk to full-time, have her pick up some of the duties in the business office, like writing of contracts for special ed facilities, and not replace the person who retired. And I think we have an obligation to do that every time we have a resignation or a retirement or a leave replacement. And with that, I would just ask that we show the last slide and wish everyone the best of luck on May 18th. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you very much, Joe. A lot of good information, different perspectives on what districts have already done and what their thinking is from a public relations standpoint, and given the fact that their circumstances are dictating budgets that are not all that popular this year. I would like to kick it to Heather for the Q&A period and have her again go over the contact and communication issues, and then I'll jump back in.
Great. Ladies and gentlemen, at this time we will conduct the question and answer session. If you would like to ask an audio question, please press 7# on your phone now, and you'll be placed in the queue in the order received. Please listen for your name or location to be announced and be prepared to ask your question when prompted. Listeners may continue to type in questions to the chat window located to the right of the presentation. We are now ready to begin.
Okay. I'm going to kick off with a question to the panel. And I don't have this directed at anybody specifically, but maybe Matt and Sean might jump in if anybody's experiencing this so far. One of the things that you two gentlemen mentioned was areas of vulnerability, know what they are, and that I think carries out through the entire year in managing your budget. You also mentioned about monitoring the news, finding out what people are saying out there. One of the things that people may be vulnerable about is comments that are placed on blogs, reporter articles, but then the comments that people make. And I think we've all seen them. Is there a tipping point? What do we do? Because most of those seem to be relatively negative, but can we learn anything from the comments that show up as a result of some of these articles? Matt and Sean, do you have any comment about that?
Well, I would say that finding where those things are happening is the first step. I do think that you need to answer them, especially if there's incorrect information that appears in a comment. You know, the internet and the blogosphere is sort of this giant town meeting no one ever envisioned. I don't think Norman Rockwell did when he painted it, and I don't think our forefathers did when they designed our form of government. But it's there and we have to live with it. Good news and bad, but you have to pay attention to it because it until our society sorts it out, much of what happens there is seen as fact, is reported as fact. I lived this over the weekend with my brother, who's just now, a much older brother, who's just now learning, gosh, there's this great free and open exchange of ideas and opinions. And he prefaced his comment with saying, I read on the internet, and then came out with this outrageous statement that was as far from factual as anything I've ever heard. So I challenged him, and when he got over the challenge part, he admitted, yes, I saw it as a comment on a blog. Well, it's not fact. I think you have, it takes time and it takes work, but I have to tell you folks, having seen this play out on the corporate side, you have got to spend the time and the energy to have someone somewhere in your organization assigned to monitor that. Facebook is another place where people are, creating groups, monitor that closely. Make sure, look, I'm not suggesting that you do anything untoward, You need to monitor it, and you need to participate in the discussion, because if you don't, that lack of participation will be seen as validation.
Yeah, in Facebook, again, that was my follow-up to this, is, I've seen it in my own communities where districts are now adopting budgets, and like all of yours, can include staff cuts, and districts have tenure and seniority protocols that they're following. But then you'll see a pop-up, save Mr. So-and-so's job, with 300 different fans of that page, with testimonials to them, not only saying how wonderful the teacher they are, but again questioning, well, why did you fire this person and not this person? Because 25 people are writing on that this person is a better teacher than the other. It's a new world in that sense, and the question about whether you think that the community responds to, or you respond to those types of things, is new, because that town meeting is bigger. Is that when you see those kind of things, Matt and Sean, is that kind of fall within the parameters of monitoring and deciding when you address falsehoods, or because these are in the public forum, and there are a lot of voters who are potentially looking at this stuff, and it could take a negative view of the budget.
Yeah, I think you automatically address something that's incorrect. I don't think you let it stand. I did a seminar not long ago for the folks at NISAC, the Association of Counties. They're scared out of their minds in part because there's a brave new world to them. But they're being beat up in some quarters about some things, and they have to defend themselves. And you do as well. I think the district has an obligation to make sure that facts are presented and that things that are not facts are challenged and corrected.
Does anybody else want to jump in on that?
If I could, Steve,
Sure.
This is Joe Dragone. I think that what Matt says about culling the blogosphere to pick up information about how people are perceiving us is really important. I'm convinced, though, that a lot of people who write those blogs are the same people who vote in American Idol, that they choose every opportunity they can to make a comment, whether the story that was written in the newspaper is about schools or not. All of a sudden, they're talking about teacher salaries. So we have to be careful and not overreact to that craziness. But if we see a preponderance of comments about a news article that's talking about the way we've presented the budget, I think that's something for us to pay attention to. Not because we're going to correct the facts in the blogosphere, but because we should think about how we're presenting our information so that we can have people understand it better and not have inaccurate comments in the blogs.
Joe, and anybody else, would you agree that in monitoring those, and particularly when they talk about inaccuracies about numbers or what has been communicated via presentations, that it's not just the business official who should be deciding how that response goes? I'm thinking of you, Joe, when you talked about the responsibilities, that it's a board superintendent and a business official, and anyone else who you think might be involved to set the strategy for responding to those kind of things.
And we have the good fortune in Roslyn of having a wonderful public relations person whose temperament is more appropriate than mine, whose understanding of the right way to communicate with the public is better than mine. And of course, we always advise the board what comments we're going to respond to, how it should be responded to, and let them decide whether or not it should be coming from the board president, the superintendent, our public relations person, or even me.
Okay, and I think that for those districts that may not have a public relations person, that conversation has to take place about who would respond and how. Is that correct?
I agree.
Okay. I believe we do have someone on the phone. Heather, could you introduce the question?
Sure. Our next question comes from Carl Fraser from the East Islip Unified.
You're up.
Carl?
Oh, sorry.
Hi, Carl. Go right ahead.
Yes, okay, sorry. The comments, I enjoyed the comments made by the various speakers, and I do have a number of questions, but I'm going to select the one I think is most pressing to me. and that is regarding fund balance. As you know, a few years ago, we are being required to project year-end fund balance. And certainly in my district, this is looked at very carefully and used by our boards, by our board members. My question is, in projecting year-end fund balances, how is this used to influence your board's decision on tax levy decisions?
Anyone want to take that one?
I'd start with, this is Joe Dragone again, I'd start with the fact that application of fund balance is not a single-year decision, that you better have a long-range plan for how fund balance is going to be used, not just next year, but in the years to come. I've told every board I've ever worked for that the year that I present a 0% tax levy increase is the year right before I'm retiring, because any one of us could figure out a way to deplete our fund balance and have a wonderful positive vote on the budget. The question is how we're going to deal with that the year following.
Okay. Yeah, I can provide a similar comment. This is Bill Hogan from Albany. How the public and the board typically wants to do it is they say, if you're going to have an $800,000 surplus, then let's just roll that right into an appropriation for next year to reduce the tax levy. That's kind of where everybody tries to go with this. But certainly I agree that you've got to change the discussion into long range, because let's suppose next year you up your fund balance appropriation by $800,000. If you can't hold that for the next 2 or 3 years, you're going to have an $800,000 loss on your revenue side the year after. So what's going to happen then? So that's where you've got to keep fund balance into the discussion of this is long-range management, and you can't just do a one-shot because there's no plan for month 13.
Can I follow up?
Yes, go right ahead.
One of the things, it's very easy for a board to look at designating fund balance or appropriating fund balance versus cutting programs. So they tend to do that rather than, and I understand that temptation not to affect programs in schools and students learning, but since we have fund balance, let's just use it to reduce the tax levy. And I think many boards in school districts will run into problems in the future by making those decisions that can hurt them.
We agree with you, Carl.
Okay.
This is Sean. If I could just add something to this discussion.
Sure.
Look, a business official or a superintendent trying to explain to an angry room full of people why we can't spend the $3 million in the bank to keep our taxes lower is a heavy lift. There is some literature out there. There's lots of written work out there which can be used to say, look, it's not just us saying this. Here's what the experts say. There are a lot of experts in municipal finance, school finance, who will tell you the pitfalls of just, doing what is seemingly the easy thing and appropriating that fund balance. And lots of horror stories out there about school districts and municipalities who've done that. Feel free to use them as illustrations.
If I may pitch in, too, to add to that, I want to harken back to some advice that Sean gave earlier, which I have a feeling that the very knowledgeable school districts on the call may find annoying, but I'm going to say it nonetheless. It's very important to explain these things in terms that your mother understands. And fund balance is a term where my mom and your mom can take a guess as to what it means. But you really don't want to take the risk of having your key stakeholders guessing as to what you mean. I think what you want to do with respect to this is build a comparison that everybody's mom would understand between what a fund balance is and what the equivalent pile of money is in a typical household. Would you liquidate your savings in order to sustain day-to-day spending if you could no longer afford it? That is a way to put this that everybody is going to understand without having their eyes glaze over at something that at first hearing is going to sound a little bit like inside accounting terminology. The only other point that I would make is that when we get to the point in our messaging where we're looking for facts to support our assertion, think of numbers as good things that come in pairs, and specifically think of every number as a numerator that is looking for a denominator. Now, how does that apply in this case? Your fund balance may be X percent of your budget average over the last 5 years. Or I pulled that number out of the sky because I do not work for a school district and have never been on a school board. But there is some way that you measure your fund balance compared to something else. Now, that's a numerator and a denominator. It is probably also knowable what is considered a good, sensible fund balance to maintain. There's a national association of people like you that has a recommendation like that, or there are statistics that show the statewide average. When you're presenting this information to your stakeholders, use a metaphor that explains it in terms they understand from their actual lives, even if they're like me and have incurable English major disease, and then have a comparison. Provide a denominator for your numerator that shows where you are on the common sense scale.
This is Sean again, and I'd be they're all aware of this, Matt. The Comptroller's Office has been kind enough to point out that collectively there's a significant amount of fund balance beyond that which he recommends. So we need to draw the distinction between that which is appropriate and that which the Comptroller recommends. We all know that sometimes can be different.
Well, thank you very much. I mean, that all those comments related to fund balance are very appropriate and helpful to districts as they, again, try to explain some of these, because they do have budget hearings and some things coming up where they're asked to explain what they've done and to do it in a way that doesn't further confuse people or make them feel like that they're obfuscating some kind of information along the way. What I would like to do, you mentioned, Matt and Sean, about finding about the resources with guidance relative to long-term planning. ASBO has some of those. We will be posting those with the reference materials for this. I'll pull some of those things together. We had a question about that. I'd like to remind everyone at this point that you can access the materials, the PowerPoint slides for this session that you've been participating in. And you can do that by going to our webpage, New York State ASBO's webpage, nysasbo.org. There is an events tab along the top, and when you click that, you will see as the top event this session, Living with an Unpopular Budget. You click there, and then you scroll down a little bit, and you will see all the downloadable PowerPoints and resources that we have for this. Joe has also indicated that he's inviting people to visit his schools, RoslinSchools.org. I think you should see this in your chat to see how they have posted information about their budget, and hopefully it will be very useful to you as well. What I'm going to do right now is I'm going to kind of go back through the panel. I'm going to ask you if you could answer this question with two comments, and that is, districts now have pretty much locked and loaded their budgets. They have budget hearings where they have to explain this and present it. They have a budget, and then they have to decide about a contingent budget. Knowing that those are the things that are coming up most very soon and most critically right now, could provide two key points. They could be right out of your presentation or something that hits you along the way. If you could go one by one and give me 2 points to consider as districts have to go through that over the next several weeks. I'm going to start right off with Matt and Sean. If you could provide us with your key insights.
Okay, Matt.
I'll start. I think you should have written messaging in the format that we described, and you should test how it works by rewriting in a document that begins with the following 2 words: Dear Mom.
I think you all know your communities far better than obviously we do. You know the bad questions you're going to get. You know who the folks are who are going to ask them, probably. You know where the pressure points are. Answer those questions yourselves before they're asked of you.
Okay, Joe Eberly.
Right, 2 things. I think one is press on with your priorities. Make sure that they're lined up with what your community is looking for, and press on, though difficult they may be, and be always analyzing the feedback. Have 2 ears and 1 voice.
Thank you, Joe. Bill and Ron.
I think we're gonna cheat and do 3, but we'll do them quickly.
Okay.
I definitely want to reiterate what Sean and Matt said, and that is you have to practice. I'm lucky in the school district to have a superintendent and a business administrator that have 70 years combined experience between them. We still practice every time before we're talking about the budget. We sit down, even if it's just for a few minutes, to make sure we know what our message is, that we're being consistent about it, and that everybody is on the same page. And also, don't forget, through your budget process, my last point, accentuate the positive. You all have great people, great programs in your school district. You have great things that your communities value. Don't forget to tell them that, especially in a budget year like this.
And the one thing I would add is just to try to weave into some of your communications some of the hot points that the public has raised or been concerned about, especially when you start cutting programs like we have. We talk about how we're going to continue on and address and continue that curriculum, et cetera.
Okay, thank you. And Joe Dragone.
I think that we need to keep in mind that the schools belong to the community. In many cases, the schools are the community. That's the only central identifying feature that you can point to that is the community. Keep that in mind. Remind people they should be prideful of the schools that they own. And also, as a business official, as a second point, there's always a next year. Keep long-term focus in mind. Let the others in your organization focus on the short term. You need to make sure that you maintain the sustainability of the educational program.
Well, thank you very much. We are at a point in time where we need to close out this webinar on this very important topic. And let me please thank each of our presenters, Matt McGuire, Sean Casey, Joe Eberly, Bill Hogan, Ron Lesko, and Joe Dragone for being with us today and sharing their insights. And we hope that you took away some pieces of this that will help you as you, if you haven't finalized your budget already, but prepare yourselves for discussing these with your publics, looking at your budget vote results, and addressing and dealing with this very difficult budget over the next year, and of course keeping next year's budget in mind as you do all that. So with that, again, thank you for all your participation. Thank you to the panel. And one last reminder is that you can get the materials for this presentation at the New York State ASBO website, nysasbo.org, under the Events tab along the top, and just select the name of this seminar, Living with an Unpopular Budget, and you can look at them and download them from there. So with that, thank you to all, and have a good day and have a good budget season, and as Joe said, good luck. Thank you.